Hi, my name is Kevin Jones, and welcome to this video on upgrading IdentityServer4 to Open.IdentityServer. So before we get into the code, what is Open.IdentityServer? Well, it's a fork of IdentityServer. It's a fork of IdentityServer4, but we've brought it up to date. So we're using the latest libraries, we've fixed any security issues, and we're building it with .NET 10. It's compatible with Duende Identity Server. So under the covers, it uses the same database structures. However, Open.IdentityServer will always be on a free-to-use license. Now we'll see. If you're upgrading from IdentityServer4 to Open.IdentityServer, it's quite a straightforward process, and we'll see that process here. If you want to look at the source code for Open.IdentityServer, then it's on GitHub, and it's at this URL, /rocksolidknowledge/open.identityserver. Okay, let's get into the code. So the project I have open here inside Rider is a version of IdentityServer that runs on IdentityServer4. And if I execute this, we can see that. So this is the home page. We can see welcome to IdentityServer4, and it's version 4.1.2. And we can get to the discovery document by clicking on the link. So I'm going to take this project and upgrade it to Open.IdentityServer. Now for this project, just to make my demo life easier, I'm running on SQLite. But you're not limited to SQLite. If you're running on SQL Server or even MySQL, then we'll have an upgrade path for that as well. The code changes will be the same, but there are some database scripts that you have to supply. We'll see those later, and I'll tell you where to get those scripts from, and we'll supply those scripts to you. So the first change we have to make is to change the versions of the libraries that we're going to use. So if I go into NuGet, now currently I'm using a pre-release version of Open.IdentityServer, and this will be a release candidate. By the time you get to see this video, we'll have a full release, and you can just use the normal release version. So inside NuGet, if I search for Open.IdentityServer, we'll find these libraries. And I want to add these libraries into the project. Now I can do that via NuGet, or probably the easiest way for me is to go into the project, to right-click, and then to edit the CSproj file. So in here, rather than using things like IdentityServer4, I'm going to use Open.IdentityServer. So I'll change this instance, and this instance of IdentityServer4 to Open.IdentityServer. And as I said, I'm currently running on an RC version, a release candidate, and so the version number for that is 100-RC 2.5. When you come to use this, it'll just be the 100 release. Once I have that in place, I no longer need the cnblocks entity framework storage reference, which we need if we're using IdentityServer4, so I can get rid of that. And finally, I'll also need a reference to Newtonsoft's JSON library, so I can include that as well. Now, if I do that and try and run this code, we are going to get loads and loads of errors. And the errors we're going to get are mostly around namespaces. Now, I'm going to ignore the migrations. In fact, I'm going to delete that migrations folder. We're assuming here you already have a database, and so you don't need these migrations anymore. So where do we start? Well, if I look in config.cs, we'll find we have things like using IdentityServer4, using identity model, and using IdentityServer4.test. And instead, we need the Open.IdentityServer versions of these. And then I can get rid of these imports. And that file now compiles. Now, I need to do this for all the other files that aren't compiling, but I'm not going to bore you and show you all that code. So I'll go away and do that and come back to you when that's finished. So we're back. And that process is really just mechanical. It's simply a matter of going through and changing the using statements to use Open.IdentityServer. There may be some other places as well. For example, you'll need to change any references of IdentityServer4.IdentityServer constants to Open.IdentityServer.IdentityServer constants. But those changes really are very, very straightforward. So now that I've put the Open.IdentityServer libraries in, and I've made those changes, if I run this, we'll find that we get to the same homepage. I haven't changed the welcome message here. It still says welcome to IdentityServer4, but notice the version now. is version 1.0.0, and I'm running on the RC. I'm running on the release candidate, so it's release candidate 2.5. So we are using the newest version now of Open.IdentityServer. But there's still a problem. If I click on the discovery document, then we get an error. And this is the place where we have to apply some SQL migrations, some SQL changes. We provide the migrations as SQL files, and they're on GitHub. So again, they're at github.com/rockssolid-knowledge/open.identityserver, and then /tree/main/source/entityframework.storage/migrations. And there'll be migrations there for all the common databases. So I'm running on SQLite, and we have 2 SQL files, 2 scripts that we need to apply to SQLite. So I'm inside Rider. If I look at the database tab and right click and do new query console. And for these files, one is for the configuration DB context. And if I just copy that, paste it into the console, and apply that to the database. And the other one is for the persisted grant DB context. I can do the same thing with that. So copy the code, go to the console, paste that into the console and execute it. And the database should now be updated. So if I close all these, run IdentityServer again. Again, it's IdentityServer4, but in this case with the Open.IdentityServer library, so release candidate 2.5. Now if I click on the discovery document, then we get the discovery document. So IdentityServer at least is working. So let me just do one last thing and show a client running against this. So this is sort of the standard test clients that we have. We have the Weather API application and the Weather MVC application. The only change I've made to this is that I've put the Duende identity model reference in, rather than just identity model from IDS4. So if I take the Weather API application first and run that, and then take the Weather MVC application and run that, we hit the home page for the Weather MVC application. If on the address bar, I go to /home/weather, it asks me to log in. I can log in with Alice, and the password is pass123$. Click on login, and we get back to the Weather MVC application's homepage, now showing the weather data. And this has authenticated using Open.IdentityServer. So this all works as you'd expect. It all works as normal. Now, if you compare Open.IdentityServer with Duende-IdentityServer, you'll notice that there are some features missing. For example, server-side sessions and things like CIBA. However, we have a roadmap, and we will add those features as time goes on. Now, if there's something you specifically need, then get in touch with us, and we'll see if we can add that feature for you. Also, the migration I showed here was very straightforward. If your migration is more complicated, we can help you with that.